I've been in the travel business for 45 years now. I started at Eastern Airlines in Miami in 1977. And if you want to think about technology challenges, this was on a mainframe with a lot less memory than your phone has. This was leased lines, 56 KB leased lines with a connectionless architecture and 6 bits. So all the messages, even if you see today some of the travel agency messages, they're in all caps because in 6 bits you don't have enough combinations for lowercase. So some of these messages are still around and how we put together some of the networks at the time. But even the protocol then, I would challenge that anybody here would have ever heard of P1024B. There was also a P1024A, but there was an A and the B depending on what you needed to do. So this is where the industry started. And even before that, airlines in particular were an industry where right after World War II, there was a big explosion in air, but it was a regulated environment, so you had to get with your government. In the case of the United States, it was the CAB, but you had to get with your government to fly where you wanted to fly. You just couldn't set up any route you wanted. And prices were also set by the governments. So it was a strangely regulated environment. And so they still needed to already interoperate. So I'll use names of airlines that don't exist anymore. Piedmont Airlines wanted to connect in Charlotte to Western Airlines going to LA. They needed a way to exchange information, both fare information, itinerary information, and passenger information. Nothing was computerized at this point. So they came up with ways to record the fares and the fare rules and how to characterize the passenger. And they did a lot of these things. So if you've been around long enough, you may even remember booking a particularly complex itinerary and saying, oh, we have to take that to the fare desk. The fare desk was literally a desk. So the rules on how you calculate an airfare, pretty much that second row where John is. The table would be that long and it's a single book, just that wide. And you had to have special training and everything, how to figure out that fare. So along come into the late 60s, air travel grew enough that they couldn't do it manually anymore. And they were literally doing it like the stock market used to work then, with a chalkboard, writing things up there and doing things. They couldn't do it anymore. So there was an infamous flight from New York to LA, where it just happened to be a senior leader of IBM on the flight and a senior person from American Airlines. And he was talking to his seatmate. They just happened to sit together and say about the problems they have. And the IBM guy said, I think we got a solution for that. So a couple of years went by pulling the teams together. It turns out what the solution was the IBM Federal Systems Division had just completed a missile guidance system for the ICBMs being installed for the Cold War. This was a near real-time system, so that's got converted to what the first reservation systems were, because the regular batch systems couldn't possibly be fast enough. So what you're working with today when you do things, you're talking to a relic that came from a missile guidance system that still things largely operate the same in the back. So I came into this in 77. That first system got implemented in 72. And then, as I said, there was a fair amount of limitations about this. What IBM did at the time is IBM didn't care about software. They only cared about selling hardware. So what they did was they would give away this system, both the operating system and the applications, with the sale of every mainframe. They didn't care. The good news is we started our first open source community without even knowing it, because every airline and several major hotel chains, and then even later the credit card companies, you still use this system every time you use a credit card, started sharing and working with each other because you were using the same code. It wasn't competitive at the time, so we all got together every year and said, oh, you fixed that problem? Well, I fixed this one. Let's swap some code. And we did all this. So for 20 years, We had a very cooperative ecosystem to share information and solving technical problems, and there were a lot of technical problems with the limitations in technology. So that went on and grew a bit, but a lot of the business, if you've been in any business long enough, you realize that it's like a DNA strand. Technology and business processes get interwound. They depend on each other because, of course, you can't start a business process without the technology underpinnings, and why would you write technology for a business process that doesn't exist? So they become mirror images of each other, and that's still true today. So what we're going to do is fast forward to the 80s and say, well, travel distribution is still stuck in the boombox era. What was happening in music and video, even by the time of the 80s, was you had to ship your product over physical media. You know, whether it was a vinyl album, a CD, or whatever, you had to ship it physically. So that meant there were manufacturers that would create that physical media, and they didn't want to go ahead and start pressing a lot of albums if they weren't going to sell. Come in the record companies, the quote record labels. They got to be gatekeepers because they were the ones who were backstopping the manufacturers to say, well, if you create 100,000 copies of this album, they're going to get sold, which backed up into, if you were a young artist, whether it was music, video, or anything else, and this, of course, included books to an extent, you weren't going to get anywhere unless one of these record labels said, well, okay, I'm convinced you're going to be a good seller, because you weren't going to make the investment to do all this infrastructure, put all this stuff out there and do this. So you can all probably think of your favorite stars, you know, that have probably been around a while, and they have their origin story about how they finally got their big break, got in front of the right person or do anything like that. So that's where they were until they got to the point where there was now a digital way to distribute their product. So even though back when we got CDs, a digital standard had been established, but the files were so damn big that the internet at the time couldn't handle it. Well, we finally got into the 2000s, and lo and behold, the capacity of the web caught up, and also the digital standards were refined to get the file size a lot smaller. Hence, their Napster moment. When somebody starts saying, the hell with the publishing companies, the hell with all of this, I'm just going to make this music and then later on video available to anybody who wants to do it, which gradually got us to where we are today, where pretty much anybody can publish their music, self-publish their music, self-publish their books, self-publish their videos, and we don't even think twice about it anymore. But it wasn't going to happen until the standards caught up and the technology caught up that I have a digital way to distribute a product. So compare that to where we are today. Well, travel is still pretty much stuck in the boombox era in the 80s. Not a whole hell of a lot has changed. The gatekeepers in travel were because of complexity. Because everything drifted and the way they did APIs, and also in particular in airlines, one of the things you have to understand is that a ticket, even your e-ticket you get today, is money. It is currency. There's a value to it. So it used to be if you found a ticket on the floor in an airport or a rail station, you could walk up to a window and just cash it in. It was printed money. Well, even today, even though they're sitting on a database somewhere, you don't just let anybody create a ticket. Because again, it's money. So that barrier still exists today in some of the major airlines, which constrains who can distribute the product. But even for everybody else, the problem now is complexity. After 50 years of all these different types of workarounds, it is now you have to have a fairly deep knowledge of this industry in order to work in it. Even if just as a travel agent, you kind of have to understand how the back ends work and how things go together. To give you an idea of the complexity, in this airline stuff I mentioned, we started in the 50s about that long fare book. All we've done for 50 years is to add more fares to it. We never delete any of them. So on any given city pair, even a domestic one, Miami to New York, but certainly New York to London or Paris or anything. And I kid you not, on average, there's 100,000 valid fares. So the processing you have to do to calculate that and calculate which fare you want is not trivial by any sense of the imagination. And even for hotels and others, their structures are very convoluted. So if you were going to distribute things like you're going to be a Booking.com or an Expedia, you have to connect to the travel companies, and those travel companies, they all publish their APIs according to the standards that have been put out, but they interpret the standards their own way. So if you're somebody like Expedia, and again, no exaggeration, the most commonly used message in there is availability, to just basically say, what are the hotel rooms, what seats are there, whether it's rail or not. They have to deal with several thousand bespoke iterations of that API, each one of them requiring custom code. So this adds a tremendous amount of labor to the factor, a lot of processing, and even today, that type of message is 90% of the messages these travel companies get. So all these things means it's just hideously complex. So if you try to find cheaper labor and everything, they may be able to code this or that, but if you don't have the basic understanding why all this craziness works the way it does, you're in trouble. Well, 25 years ago, the Open Travel Alliance was formed, and we started putting out that digital format. First in XML, and now what we actually produce is Open API description documents, the 3.0 version. So we put that out so the digital format is there, but we've never had our Napster moment. And the reason we haven't had that, because even though we have a digital way to distribute a product, like an airline seat or a hotel room or a berth in a cruise ship or a seat on a rail, there's these other barriers that in order to collect the content, as I said, is hideously complex. So you can't put together a business model if you're a startup, and a lot of startups come to me. I get several a month that come up and are going to use AI ML and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to make a disruptive app and everything to help plan travel. I'm unfortunately the bearer of bad news to say, you're not going to be able to connect to anybody. And so where we are today is that, to kind of give you an idea of the discrepancy here, in 2019, the US Commerce Department calculated that just travel spend in the US alone, just travel related, which would include meeting meals or golf tee times or doing the other things that are all travel related, was $1.1 trillion. The amount that went through where you are all booking travel today was less than 20% of that. So we're talking $800 million or more of travel spend that's unmanaged out there. Now, how many of you really enjoyed booking your trip to come here, getting your hotel together? Was it really easy? No. So this is why I make this analogy to say, we're still stuck in the damn boombox era. I mean, the technology has made leaps and bounds, but we are unable to take advantage of how the cloud works. We are unable to take advantage of shared nothing architectures and the other things to scale enough cheaply to get all of travel-related spend into the mix. So what we say is the traveler, deserve better. What you should be able to say is, I'm going to the Open Source Summit in Denver. Give me a solution. It's not that the technology isn't there, especially with LLMs and everything. The technology is all well understood. It's the access to the data. Because the APIs are so convoluted, their workflows are not the same or anything else, it's hard to suck up the data. And of course, in air, there's still this nasty little thing that they won't let you actually do a ticket, unless you're somebody with an IATA authorization. And of course, they're not giving that out. They want to keep it constrained. So what it takes, well, what we want to provide you, the traveler, is you should be able to pull up an app, and in an instant, get a solution to say, book me everything I need to do for the open source summit. And oh, by the way, my group wants to have a group outing at a restaurant nearby. Here's my constraints and everything. Just go do it. It's not a technology problem. It's an industry-wide problem of cooperation and needless complexity. So what we need to do this is several orders of magnitude more travel products out there in the cloud, accessible by anybody who wants to access it. It would still be business agreements for certain things, but we have to get everything out there, and we're talking tour operators, restaurants, golf courses, everything. In order to do what you all would want us to do, we have to get all those products available out there in the web, out there in the cloud. Also, we have to be able to allow bundling, because it would be crazy to say, here's your solution for going to Denver, but oh, by the way, we have to charge your credit card 5 different times for the different players because they all refuse to cooperate. So again, that's not a technology problem. And there's payment things going on in LF and everything else that know the answer to these problems. So it's really rethinking this and rethinking the distribution agreements, because the other thing about this industry is we are in a request-reply mode. That goes back to what I said before, that we started this late 60s, early 70s when we turned on this, and everything was short questions, because this whole solution was designed to talk to an agent, a human agent. Not a machine learning agent, not an AI-based agent. It was meant to talk to a human agent that had that knowledge in their heads, what the hell it is they were doing, and how do you combine air, car, rail, hotel, everything together. They had to have the domain knowledge to do this. So one of the things is we have to switch that we're in this polling model or pull model to go get this data, to say all this data is in the cloud. And the solutions can be bundled and put together, and we're going to pay one time. So again, none of these areas, it's not that we don't know what to do, it's getting together and figuring out how to do it. So we're contending that we're going to use open source as the way to do it. This really is a big problem. Again, we're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar business here, and that's just the United States. If you add Europe and everything, we're probably at 100 trillion worldwide and everything of these type of transactions that go on. And the thing is nobody can just change on their own. You can't have a Delta Airlines that say, oh, I'm going to adopt this new stuff, I'm going to do this, and a Hilton Hotel does there, or a Cour in France or anything, because we all have to talk to each other. In order to pull together a trip for you, we have to interoperate. So if you change fundamentally the way your workflow goes, your business flow goes, then nobody else can talk to you. They don't know what to do with it. So it has to be pulled together as an open source community. So what we're going to do in the process of doing is we're creating an open travel foundation as a sub-foundation under the Linux Foundation. It didn't make the main tent today, but hopefully you'll see this presented in August in Amsterdam. We're still getting the fundamentals of this put together. So what the Open Travel Group has done till this point, we're a separate nonprofit still, we're not part of LF yet, is we've been publishing messages and models that gave a standard way to digitize the information, but as I said, everybody took the standards and did their own thing when they implemented it. What we're going to do this time is, oh hell no, we're going to give you the code as far as how to publish an offer and how to consume an offer. As part of this, we're going to actually be releasing open source code that anybody can run. We're not going to run it, but just say, this is how you can put up a publishing service. This is how you can put up a shopping service to say, this is how you can go ahead and use relevancy-based scoring to find the best options for your customer. And we're going to do this with Linux Foundation because they're kind of used to doing big things. So they've recently done a lot of industry-specific things in automotive-grade Linux and other things they've done. You've heard a lot of the stuff already about some of the big changes that are going on in various industries. And then the one other thing I am very much counting on is that I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. There's a whole lot of what we're going to need to pull this off, because what we basically want to do is, as far as those providing the actual products, a travel product or service, we want to lower the cost of how they publish it, and really a publishing model. Instead of you asking me 50 questions about, can I go here, can I go there, roughly what the cost will be and everything, is like, no, the travel companies will publish that here is my offer to have this type of experience. And their brand logo, like Marriott or Hilton, everything goes with it, which is something they very much want, because usually by the time you see something on Expedia, most of their branding's been stripped away and they cannot do personalization. This will handle personalization. They can put in rules to say this is for a leisure traveler, this is for a business traveler, this is for an AWS traveler, this is for an IBM traveler, or this can be down to any one of you individually to say, this is a valued customer of mine, here's a specific offer for the experience you want at this hotel that's just for you and nobody else. Because that's all just a basic series of rules that would have to be contained in the offer container we will create. And so what we want to make it is, even if you run a scuba shop, and I do a lot of scuba diving, I talk to a lot of the scuba shops and see how they publish their stuff, they would dearly love to be able to publish their product that can be seen in Europe or anybody else who's planning a trip to America. There's a whole consortium of travel agencies and others in the United States that what they work on is how to provide value to foreign people, foreign travelers coming into the United States to say, this is how we connect you with all the things you want to do. There's a deep need for this, but we have to be able to pull it into a thing where you can publish all this at extremely low cost. So we will publish open source software that will basically provide all the publishing capability, again, to be run by individual companies and everything that want to expose a publishing service. In the middle, we will do the management of these pools of offers. Again, just putting out the code, and you'll probably see some of the big travel distribution companies, some you may have heard of like Amadeus and Sabre and others that will continue to do this, or Booking.com will probably do this, but they will manage it and say, okay, what offers are still valid, whatever. We'll give them all the technical mechanisms for eventing and everything else about how you would handle all these offers in the cloud. But then there's the actual channels. And don't think of just travel like Booking.com or Travelocity or anything else like that. Everybody wants to be a channel. Hilton Hotels would dearly love to sell you as their customer a total experience and say, here's a ground transportation to get to my hotel. This are the things to do around there. They have trouble competing with Airbnb because Airbnb can leverage crowdsourcing from all the different people that put their properties in. The big hotel chains can't do that. This will allow them to also gather the information to say, well, this is the amusement parks, these are the concerts, these are the other things going on around you, and their offers are in the cloud also. So all of them will be taking this and putting their own mark on it about how am I selecting you the best travel experience. Of course, that'll be relevancy-based scoring under AI and LLM and those other things, but I'm also just making clear in the open source way, we're providing the function because these should be commodity functions about how to publish something and how to maintain it and how to search for it. On either end, everybody puts their mark on the digital footprint here. What is my product or service? What's my value add? And when they extract it out, who does the best job of shopping for you? You as the customer will decide who's finding the best products. But we will need a lot of the technologies you're seeing in this conference because we'll have to say like, well, distributed identity foundation. Well, I have to make sure if I'm making a personalized offer to you, I have to know it's you. I don't need to know anything else about you. I just need to know it's you. And therefore, if I'm a channel passing along somebody's offer, that I know I'm exposing it to the right person. And there's all kinds of things like that. The location information to say, where is this relevant? Where is it not? Leverage overture maps. Open wallet, start getting towards that, well, there's going to be a single payment here. How are we going to handle that? How are we going to back out things? There's all that work going on. Open SSF, that I have to make sure this is a valid offer. I know who this came from. This isn't somebody who spoofed an offer to get some information. So the great news is all of this is already there. And so pulling together through this proposed foundation, we'll start bringing it together for a specific industry, as this is how we're going to do it in travel. So where we are now is we're going and forming some of the founding members, going some of the big corporations, and there's a lot to explain here. How is this all going to work? Because this will be very disruptive to the current business model. Because the current business model works on the transaction rates that are coming to a back end. A lot of that will go away. And as with any industry that's, we're introducing something disruptive, we're going to ruin some people's business models, because their business model today is based on the chaos of today. The fact that this takes specialty knowledge and it's so hard to do, there's people that their entire business model is based on that. So this is going to get interesting, but we're pulling together, and our message to all of them that we need all these various players at the table. And right now we're in the process of getting the big players to the table to say, you need to be at the table. Because the numbers I gave you before is one of those things, is this is going to happen, either in the Linux Foundation or not, because there's too much money at stake here. As I said, the travel spend that's managed today is only about 20% of the potential. And this will cut out a lot of the cost that's built in, because we're doing things basically the way we did them when the first system came up in the 70s. The network topology has changed, and some other ways we represent the product has changed, all the way to JSON. Well, I'll say REST, but nobody does REST correctly in this industry, because we're still stateful back end, so we fudge it a lot and say, oh yeah, it's REST. No, it's not. So there's a lot of these things to pull together, but the message will be going out, and we'll see this more on LinkedIn, and as we do these things to get this going forward, to say, okay, even if you're skeptical about it, you need to be at the table, because you need to put your guidance in how this is going to work and what the transition steps are going to be. So how much time do I got left? Okay, that's the end of the charts I have. So if you got technology questions or business questions or want to know anything more, anybody have any questions?
Backend protocol. So backend protocol basically enables multiple applications to talk to each other. The problem that we're discussing over here. So it's a certain protocol. If all the applications follow that simple protocol, then the applications can show each other's data to each other's customers.
That sounds to me, I'm not familiar with it, but that sounds to me that could be an important technology for the transition. Because a lot of this can't change overnight. You can't change the backends overnight. You can't change the way the backends work overnight. And that helps pull some of the information together. So one thing I'll explain related to that, and also just what that URL is there, we are already starting the work group to define what this offer container looks like, what its actual behaviors are going to be. We have a start on it because we do what's called object-based modeling. Instead of doing API first, we do object first, and which defines both the data and the APIs. So we have a fair amount of how this is going to work already in object models, and we even have a compiler that creates the description documents that creates JSON. I think it's completely stupid how much of the industry actually writes schema by hand. That's just nuts. So that's just another thing we do, that we model first and create the artifacts. But there's going to have to be a transition, that what happens a lot in the chaos today is what's called message normalization. So your Marriott, you send out your data this way, your Hilton is slightly different, your Accor, it's different, and various companies, some of you heard of like Derbysoft and for airlines, Skyscanners and others, and what their main model is they're normalizing the message, but unfortunately they're also dumbing it down because they're just taking one proprietary format and putting it into their own proprietary format, and they lose data every time this happens. You suggest a way that might be to consolidate to what we would say we want to move to offer normalization. Talk to various backends, pull the data that I really need to populate the offer, and try to get that consistent and cleaned up. So it's a good discussion we could have to say about, that's as we form the foundation, there will be technical steering committees and everything else like normally in LF, and those are the type of technology problems. It's not that there is a solution out there. There's many solutions out there. It's getting engineers together and architects together and picking the one that's going to work best for this.
This is a great idea to make the travel easier for the consumers, but like you mentioned, this is disruption to the current industry. Who are the ones you see like more lean towards this change versus who are the ones more resistant to this, and how do you see the foundation kind of like bring those dynamics together?
Excellent question. So the ones that are really listening to us right now and getting more and more interested, as on the top of my other chart, the channels, the actual sellers. Even Airbnb is showing interest and others, because if you tell them that I'll have orders of magnitude more things to sell, that's an easy sell to them. Saying, yeah, I get fees off all this. I get transaction. This is great. You're telling me I'll be able to sell all this other stuff? And when you get down to the bottom, hotel owners, the actual hotel owners as well. In hospitality, we have a distinct group of the people that actually own the properties and the brands that you're used to, because Marriott, Hilton, and others actually own very few of the properties anymore. It's a franchise model and everything else. So they have distinctive pros and cons. The hotel owners want this because they even have some idea saying, well, maybe I don't want to sell this through the brand. Can I publish my offer directly? Well, yeah. Nothing's going to stop you. It's your business. The brands are a little scared of that, but the brands also have the problem that they're not able to offer you a complete experience. They're able to offer you experience within property, but it ends at the driveway. They're getting the crap kicked out of them by Airbnb and other things. So that's an excellent example for the hotel brands. There's a yin and a yang here. There's a good news and there's some bad news, and they have to weigh which is better. Now in the middle, these companies that literally feed off the chaos, they're going to be a lot tougher because I have to convince them to saying, you're making money off of because this is so damn convoluted. However, as I said in this previous chart, there are services to provide at the bottom, there are services to provide at the top. I'm going to give you code to do offer management, but Linux Foundation, we're not doing it. So some of those people that find that this is going to really mess up their financial model, it's convincing them, but I've got a new financial model for you. This stuff isn't going to manage itself. And again, as an open source thing, we're not doing it. So if you jump on the bandwagon and everything, you'll just be replacing one revenue stream for a different one that has much more added value, which I believe many of you have probably experienced in other industries and everything, that for some, it's a winner. For some, it's like, eh, and some for that, oh, hell no. But it's getting them to listen long enough is like, no, what I'm asking you to do is transform one revenue model to another, which goes back to my boombox. Two big stores in the United States at that time, Best Buy and Circuit City. Who's ever been to a Circuit City? That's old enough. Okay, they couldn't make the transformation. Best Buy is still here. They're the ones who are a little more leading, and that's one of the examples saying if you understand this is going to happen and you start changing your business model soon enough, you'll be okay. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
So again, if any of you are interested in knowing more, go to the opentravel.org website. We'll be trying to pull together the founding members and some sponsors and getting signups over the summer, and our plan is to have something to announce or really put out there at the OSS Summit in August.
Sorry, late question, but this really seems like something that would be interesting and useful to have like business strategists consult on for how to incentivize the interested parties. Are there any consulting firms joining the OTA?
Not yet. This has turned out to be a little hard for some of them to get their head around. But it's one of the reasons for partnering and moving this into the Linux Foundation, because the investment groups and the people that do exactly that, Linux has the connections, I don't. So that's what we're working on during the summer and looking at the target audiences. And again, my other chart, that it's not just the organizational capacity that Linux Foundation brings, it's all the other projects. And then to have kind of Linux as a clearinghouse to say, okay, these are the things to plug in and leverage rather than reinventing the wheel. So there's two primary reasons for doing this with the Linux Foundation. They have a Rolodex I can't compete with. And so, and Linux has been wanting to do something in travel for a while now, and this looks like their opportunity. So again, check with our website. Again, welcome anybody to get involved any way they want to get involved now. We're going to have a lot of lovely technical arguments figuring out how this is going to work at scale. It's going to be fun. Again, I'm still at this point convinced that there's not a way to do this, and multiple things we're arguing about. There's going to be multiple ways to achieve what we need to do at the technical challenges. It's just arguing and coming down to what's the way we're going to do it. But I've been going through this for quite a while now, and even I was a VP of architecture at one of the big distribution companies, and John here was there too, and with John and others, we've actually proven this out on several volume tests about how we can even use Gremlin and other type databases to find the objects quickly. And we have a lot of the trickier stuff that we already have a reference point that we already proved to ourselves that the cloud can do it. And all the major cloud providers have a toolbox that basically gives us everything we need. It's just convincing the big players to say, hold your nose, let's go. This is going to be a fun ride, but this industry has to change. And so a lot of it is also building the momentum out with you, the traveling public, to say, the more you understand, like, it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to punish me so much every time I try to organize a trip or pay somebody else to organize my trip because it's hopelessly complex. It's also building the momentum that way, is like, we're mad as hell and we're not going to put up with this anymore. That it? Okay, thank you, everybody.